Chapter 5 of The Lost Continent. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Lost Continent by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Chapter 5. As we entered deeper into what had once been the city, the evidences of man's past occupancy became more frequent. For a mile from the arch there was only a riot of weeds and undergrowth and trees covering small mounds and little hillocks that I was sure were formed of the ruins of stately buildings of the dead past. But presently we came upon a district where shattered walls still raised their crumbling tops in sad silence above the grass-grown sepulchres of their fallen fellows. Softened and mellowed by ancient ivy stood these sentinels of sorrow, their sacred faces still revealing the rents and gashes of shrapnel and of bomb. Contrary to our expectations, we found little indication that lions in any great numbers laired in this part of ancient London. Well-worn pathways, moulded by padded paws, led through the cavernous windows or doorways of a few of the ruins we passed, and once we saw the savage face of a great black-maned lion scowling down upon us from a shattered stone balcony. We followed down the bank of the Thames after we came upon it. I was anxious to look with my own eyes upon the famous bridge, and I guessed too that the river would lead me into the part of London where stood Westminster Abbey and the Tower. Realizing that the section through which we had been passing was doubtless outlying, and therefore not so built up with large structures as the more centrally located part of the old town, I felt sure that farther down the river I should find the ruins larger. The bridge would be there in part, at least, and so would remain the walls of many of the great edifices of the past. There would be no such complete ruin of large structures as I had seen among the smaller buildings. But when I had come to that part of the city which I judged to have contained the relics I sought, I found havoc that had been wrought there even greater than elsewhere. At one point upon the bosom of the Thames there rises a few feet above the water a single disintegrating mound of masonry. Opposite it, upon either bank of the river, are tumbled piles of ruins overgrown with vegetation. These, I am forced to believe, are all that remain of London Bridge, for nowhere else along the river is there any other slightest sign of pier or abutment. Rounding the base of a large pile of grass-covered debris, we came suddenly upon the best preserved ruin we had yet discovered. The entire lower story and part of the second story of what must once have been a splendid public building rose from a great knoll of shrubbery and trees, while ivy, thick and luxuriant, clambered upward to the summit of the broken walls. In many places the grey stone was still exposed, its smoothly chiselled face pitted with the scars of battle. The massive portal yawned, sombre and sorrowful, before us, giving a glimpse of marble halls within. The temptation to enter was too great. I wished to explore the interior of this one remaining monument of civilization now dead beyond recall. Through this same portal, within these very marble halls, had Gray and Chamberlain and Kitchener and Shaw perhaps come and gone with the other great ones of the past. I took Victoryl's hand in mine. "Come," I said. "I do not know the name by which this great pile was known, nor the purposes it fulfilled. It may have been the palace of your sires, Victory. From some great throne within, your forebears may have directed the destinies of half the world. Come." I must confess to a feeling of awe as we entered the rotunda of the great building. Pieces of massive furniture of another day still stood where man had placed them centuries ago. They were littered with dust and broken stone and plaster, but otherwise so perfect was their preservation I could hardly believe that 2 centuries had rolled by since human eyes were last set upon them. Through one great room after another we wandered, hand in hand, while Victory asked many questions, and for the first time I began to realize something of the magnificence and power of the race from whose loins she had sprung. Splendid tapestries, now mildewed and rotting, hung upon the walls. There were mural paintings, too, depicting great historic events of the past. For the first time, Victory saw the likeness of a horse, and she was much affected by a huge oil which depicted some ancient cavalry charge against a battery of field guns. In other pictures there were steamships, battleships, submarines, and quaint-looking railway trains, all small and antiquated in appearance to me, but wonderful to Victory. She told me that she would like to remain for the rest of her life where she could look at those pictures daily. From room to room we passed, until presently we emerged into a mighty chamber, dark and gloomy, for its high and narrow windows were choked and clogged by ivy. Along one panelled wall we groped, our eyes slowly becoming accustomed to the darkness. A rank and pungent odor pervaded the atmosphere. We had made our way about half the distance across one end of the great apartment when a low growl from the far end brought us to a startled halt. Straining my eyes through the gloom, I made out a raised dais at the extreme opposite end of the hall. Upon the dais stood 2 great chairs, high-backed and with great arms. The throne of England! But what were those strange forms about it? Victory gave my hand a quick, excited little squeeze. "The lions!" she whispered. Yes, lions indeed. Sprawled about the dais were a dozen huge forms, while upon the seat of one of the thrones a small cub lay curled in slumber. As we stood there for a moment, spellbound by the sight of those fearsome creatures occupying the very thrones of the sovereigns of England, the low growl was repeated, and a great male rose slowly to his feet. His devilish eyes bored straight through the semi-darkness toward us. Had he discovered the interloper? What right had man within this palace of the beasts? Again he opened his giant jaws, and this time there rumbled forth a warning roar. Instantly 8 or 10 of the other beasts leapt to their feet. Already the great fellow who had spied us was advancing slowly in our direction. I held my rifle ready, but how futile it appeared in the face of this savage horde. The foremost beast broke into a slow trot, and at his heels came the others. All were roaring now, and the din of their great voices reverberating through the halls and corridors of the palace formed the most frightful chorus of thunderous savagery imaginable to the mind of man. And then the leader charged, and upon the hideous pandemonium broke the sharp crack of my rifle. Once, twice, thrice, 3 lions rolled, struggling and biting, to the floor. Victory seized my arm with a quick, "This way! Here is a door!" and a moment later we were in a tiny antechamber at the foot of a narrow stone staircase. Up this we backed, Victory just behind me, as the first of the remaining lions leapt from the throne room and sprang for the stairs. Again I fired, but others of the ferocious beasts leapt over their fallen fellows and pursued us. The stairs were very narrow. That was all that saved us, for as I backed slowly upward, but a single lion could attack me at a time, and the carcasses of those I slew impeded the rushes of the others. At last we reached